You ladies ready?
Yep.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I mean, your time is precious, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna start off by just introducing you all. And to our attendees, hello. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Dr. Tamika Ellington. I'm an associate professor of fashion and interim assistant dean for the College of the Arts. I'm also co-curator of Textures, the History and Art of Black Hair. Over the last 3.5 years with my research partner and co-curator, Dr. Joseph Underwood, African art historian, he and I, in partnership with the Kent State University Museum, have worked to bring the Textures exhibition to life. Textures is the largest exhibition that the KSU Museum has done to date, so we're very, very proud of that. The show is a blend of historical archives from Egyptian era to today's well-known contemporary artists. Textures will open September 2021, so stay tuned for an amazing show. And so it's now my pleasure and great honor to introduce to you our speakers. An associate professor of journalism at Temple University, Lori Tharps is also an award-winning author and mother of three. So am I. I'm also a mother of three. Yes. Originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, she now makes her home in Philadelphia. Tharps is the author of 3 critically acclaimed nonfiction books that deal with race, culture, and identity. Hair Story, Untangling the Roots of Black Hair in America. And let me just say to you guys, for those that are attending, if you've never read Hair Story is such an amazing contribution to Black culture. It's the book that got me started on my journey with doing research on hair. So I just told Professor Tharps that I so appreciate the work that that she was able to do with that book. So her other book is Kinky Gazpacho, Life, Love, and Spain. And her most recent work is called Same Family, Different Colors, Confronting Colorism in America's Diverse Families. She also hosts the podcast My American Melting Pot, which is a podcast that celebrates multicultural books and the people who write them. Dr. Ingrid Banks is currently chair and associate professor in the Department of Black Studies at UC Santa Barbara. She received her PhD in comparative ethnic studies from the University of California at Berkeley. She is the author of Hair Matters, Beauty, Power, and Black Women's Consciousness. This book also is another one that came out, and the timing of this particular book was quite interesting because the natural hair movement started around in this same time frame. So Dr. Banks was ahead of the game and ahead of the curve, and so when she published this particular book, it really helped to inform kind of what that natural hair movement was going to be like. So she is also currently preparing a book manuscript based on the 14-month multi-city ethnographic study that examines contemporary Black culture, contemporary Black beauty salon culture. So that's going to be really awesome. This conversation today will be moderated by the co-founders of ARC, the Anti-Racism and Criticism Collective student organization. Abby Hermosia is a current MA candidate in art history at Kent State University and will be working as a curatorial assistant at the Art Bridges Foundation in Arkansas after she graduates in May. Congratulations, Abby.
Thank you.
And Bree Robinson is a recent graduate of Kent State Art History Department and also co-founder of ARC within Digital Black Film Collective. She recently participated in the Cleveland Museum of Art's preventative conservation internship and aspires to do work decolonizing art spaces. There's a lot of work to be done, Bree, a lot of work to be done. During this session, if you have any questions, these are for our attendees. If you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat for Abby and Bree in order to keep the conversation flowing. And so now it's my pleasure to present to you a conversation on the social criticisms and politicisms of Black hair.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ellington, for that fantastic introduction to our guests, and thank you to them and everyone here in the audience tonight joining us. My name is Abby Hermosia, graduate student KSU and co-founder of Anti-Racism and Criticism Collective, ARC. And Bree.
Hi, I'm Bree Robinson. I'm co-founder of ARC and founder Within Digital. As Dr. Ellington gave that wonderful introduction, I also worked with Dr. Ellington and Dr. Underwood as a curatorial assistant for Textures. We're glad to see so many new and familiar faces here tonight. ARC is a reading collective for students of visual art at Kent State and beyond. We're focused on materials and discussions related to anti-racism and systemic issues within the art world. Usually, our sessions revolve around certain reading materials. So if you haven't had a chance to look at Dr. Banks and Professor Tharps' essays for the exhibition catalog yet, we encourage you to do so soon.
Yeah, and our sessions are typically very conversational and informal. So this is a really exciting dynamic to have tonight. For this session, as Dr. Ellington said, Bree and I will lead the discussion with some questions for Dr. Banks and Professor Tharps, after which we will open up the discussion for the audience members. So submit a comment or question in the chat box, and we will, once we get to that portion of the evening, our moderators will help us get your questions answered. To start, I thought I'd ask our guests about the main themes that are featured in their essays, as we saw in the catalog for the exhibition Textures. So your essays featured in the catalog provoke questions about narrative and ideology, specifically within the United States. Dr. Banks refers to this through ideas such as W.E.B. Du Bois' double consciousness and Kimberly Crenshaw's notion of narrative power. Professor Tharps poignantly suggests that Black hair is not complicated, it is complex. Might you two expand on these ideas for us? Whoever would like to start.
Okay, I can certainly start. And I want to start out by saying thanks to Tamika Ellington and Joseph Underwood for inviting me to be a part of the Textures project. I mean, I'm so incredibly honored, as well as being a part of today's event, and the students, Anti-Racism Collective, Bree and Abby, thank you so much for your work in organizing this event today. As well as generating some great questions. And thanks to all the folks in the background who are working, doing all the labor to keep this webinar going. I know what that's like in this moment of Zoom, of these Zoom rooms. And so thanks to everybody in the background. One of the things that, struck me with Kentura's, and hopefully I'm pronouncing her names correctly, Ariel's internal battle, I looked at this very interesting oil painting, and here I saw, this young Black woman or even Black girl with, yes, this is beautiful. Thank you, Bree. Thank you, Abby. And, to me, this battle, it reminded me of Du Bois's double consciousness, right? These two warring souls, Black people having one foot in, Black culture and 1 foot in American culture and white mainstream culture, and trying to reconcile that. So that's one way that I thought about this. And I know I'm going to talk more about this as we continue. But then there was another thing that was striking about this, beautiful painting is choice, and this speaks to Kimberly Crenshaw's narrative ideology. One of the things, been so great in articulating is recognizing the importance of believing Black girls and women's stories, and, because of the ways in which racism and sexism intersect, our stories as Black women aren't believed, about instances of racism, sexism, classism, heterosexism. These things are, often seen as Black people being, Black women being self-serving. And so when I looked at Ariel's internal battle, I began thinking about this whole issue of, okay, yeah, it's about, these two warring souls, but it can also be about Black women's choice. do I straighten? Do I go natural? Because one of the things that, I discuss in the essay is, well, I think I discuss it more elsewhere, but as Black women, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't, we're damned if we straighten, we're damned if we, wear our hair natural. And so then choice becomes so incredibly important because as Black women, as Black people, and certainly as Black women, we have not always enjoyed sovereignty over our bodies. And so then, having sovereignty over what we do with our hair, regardless of what we do with it. And, I've been very, very, deliberate in stating that, and one of the reasons that I wrote Hair Matters is because, I kept reading often written by Black men or Black nationalists about, Black women, when we straighten our hair, we're acting out a form of, self-hatred. And, I want to piggyback on what Professor Tharps states in her essay that, look, Black hair is complex. And, the reasons why as Black women, we wear our hair in all types of ways, it's complex. It can't be reduced to, self-hatred. It can't even be reduced to politics. It's complex. And I end the essay by saying, look, we cannot reduce Black women's hair or Black women's hairstyling practices to one thing, because what that does, it completely denies Black women's agency. And, I grew up around Black women, a mother, a grandmother, aunts who wore their hair all types of ways. One day somebody had an afro, the next day somebody had braids, the next day someone had, straight hair flowing down their back. I remember my aunt in the 1970s with her T-top orange Corvette, and her hair would just be blowing in the wind, and I know what a proud Black woman she was, even when she had the, straightened wig on. And when she put that afro wig on, she was that same powerful, strong, proud Black woman. And so one of the things that, I wanted to grapple with in the essay was to think about the complexity that Black women bring to our hairstyling choices. And again, I look at internal battle as a battle about certainly Black people's place within a nation that is anti-Black, but also Black women's choices within the context of, how do we maintain sovereignty over our bodies? So I'll stop there and I'll pass the mic to Professor Tharps.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Banks. And, that was a good setup for me. And of course, thank you to Dr. Ellington and to Abby and Bree for moderating today. And again, I'm just honored to be here to participate in this project all around. I think this, the idea of doing this collection, doing this, the whole Textures project as a exhibit is really exciting because it does bring so many opportunities to dig deeper into what Black hair means. So Abby, can you repeat my question, please? Just because I don't want to go off on a total tangent.
Oh, sure. No, and tangents are more than welcome.
I'm sure I will go off on a tangent, but at least I wanted to start on the question and then lead my way into the tangent. Yeah.
Yeah, the question is mainly just asking to expand upon those main themes that you bring into your catalog essay, specifically how you suggest that Black hair is not complicated, it is complex, and just kind of expanding on where those ideas came from.
Right. So I've been talking about Black hair for over 20 years because I did write the book Hair Story, Untangling the Roots of Black Hair in America. I co-wrote it with another journalist. That book came out in 2001. It started out as my master's thesis from graduate school in like the mid to late 90s. And then we updated the book in 2014 And I have continuously been talking, researching, writing about Black hair. So literally we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of Hair Story. So over all these years that I've been writing about it, people use the term, myself included, until I caught myself, it's complicated. People will say, well, why is Black hair demonized? Or why is it political or politicized? And it's, why can a Black woman or a Black man wear their hair this way, but a white woman can't? Or all these different things. And it's always been like, well, it's complicated. And that saying that it's complicated kind of has a negative connotation, and it's applied to the hair itself. Black hair is not complicated, because complicated again makes it sound like it's inherently negative. And that is always the lens at which we seem to be discussing Black hair, is that it's this problem that we have to solve. Black hair is not inherently problematic. It is problematic when you put it in white society. That's when it becomes a problem to be solved or a problem to be fixed. On the other hand, Black hair is complex. And it's complex because it has multiple layers of meaning imbued in all of its beautiful strands, right? So from the earliest records of African civilization, we know that the hair, the way that people styled their hair, signified their position in society, what tribe or family they belonged to, what status they had in their particular culture and community. So the more complicated a hairstyle was, the more status that person had. So men had oftentimes more elaborate hairstyles than women. We know that men who were going off to war wore certain hairstyles. Women who were waiting for their men to come back from war wore certain hairstyles. So just in that idea that the hair could signify all of these different identity markers is complex, right? We also know that the hair could be a spiritual conduit to the gods. We know that the hair could be considered like that place where spirits resided or where messages came through. Hair was known to be powerful, like a powerful source of magic or spirit, meaning if like a person's hair was a piece of a lock of somebody's hair was in the wrong person's hand, they could basically hold on to part of your spirit. They could put a spell on you. They could put a hex on you. And we use those terms in English, because in the United States, these ideas carried over from Africa and became part of African American folk culture as well. So there are so many levels and layers and complexity to our hair. And those levels and layers of complexity are actually fascinating, beautiful, grounded in our cultural heritage. But that doesn't make it complicated. That doesn't make it problematic. Again, until you take this thing out of its natural habitat, if you will, put it in a foreign hostile habitat and expect it to be revered and treated in the way that it had been in its actual natural habitat, if you will. So I mean, if you looked at you take like you take a turtle out of the ocean and you put him in an aquarium and he doesn't thrive, you're like, you have to spend all this money getting all kinds of food for him and getting the right temperature of the water, because it's complicated to take care of a turtle outside of its natural environment. Well, it's complicated to understand all of the nuances and beauty and ritual and care for Black hair in this hostile environment, where in addition to the fact that everybody else around you has a different type of hair, so even the caring of the hair is not understood, but then you have to add on the layer of the white European, not only aesthetic, but white supremacist mindset that then denigrates anything that is inherently African. And so what is complex then becomes complicated and then becomes a problem. So it might seem like just a linguistical delineation, but in fact, we really are talking about the fact that Black hair has so many beautiful attributes, but they're misunderstood or deliberately denigrated in this kind of hostile environment.
Great, thank you so much. Bree, if you'd like to continue with your question.
My question is for Dr. Banks. In your essay, you thoroughly examined Ariel's internal battle, and you posited an analysis of Black hair experiences and styling as a realm of double consciousness. Can you expand further on this? And I also wonder if there are any other works of art or literature that you imagine would express something similar to this.
Yeah, and thank you, Bree. That's a great question. And one of the things that I think is important to understand, and this is what Professor Tharps was getting at by mentioning white supremacy, is that hair and Black people's hairstyling practices certainly become a proxy for talking about race, right? Racial ideology, racial discrimination, Du Bois argued that, the problem of the 20th century would be the problem of the color line. And so, there's a way in which, the history of the professionalization of hairstyling, it happens in the, in the early part of the 20th century. And certainly, Professor Tharps chronicles this, quite nicely in her textures piece. And, but what's interesting is that the same type of segregation that we see within the broader society, within the context of politics, within the context of economics, but also within the social realm, that same kind of segregation was happening within the beauty industry and certainly within the hairstyling industry, right? And so, when I look at internal battle, again, Du Bois was just ringing in my head, again, it's two warring souls, right? But I also think that, there's a way in which we have to understand how racial ideology actually is mapped onto Black people's heads, literally, right? And so, we don't know that white hair is quote unquote good, or these European, beauty standards are good, without this idea that there's something wrong with Black bodies, that there's something wrong with African bodies, right? And so that's the problem. And that's where these two warring souls come about, right? And, I've always argued that, if whether you're a layperson, a student, a scholar, if you want to know something, about how racial ideology developed, just look at the hair, look at hair. And even in a broader context, beauty, because again, everything we, know about beauty is laced with racial ideology. And this begins under, what would become the United States. But this begins during colonial slavery times and then continues during the antebellum period. Right? And so all of this then, culminates, at the turn of the 20th century when, Du Bois is making this, argument that, Black people have to exist, right, within these two, competing worlds. And so that's what I see when I look, well, that's one thing that I see when I look at this piece, it really, again, Du Bois is double consciousness, I think. Now, are there any other works of art and or literature that would express something similar? I think that, we can look at the late, may she rest in peace, Toni Morrison's, great novel, The Bluest Eye. I think that one comes to mind, quite quickly. But we were talking, Bree and Abby, before we started the webinar, and I think that Milton Bowens, and I'll put his name in the chat. And I'm a collector of his work, and I have a piece right here behind me. I have it on the floor because I'm going through these housing renovations. But he asked this question, what did Black women do, after the advent of the hot comb? And so the answer, well, they didn't relax. So let's get that straight, right? And I think that's a very important statement, right? Because, as Black women, regardless of how we wear our hair, we catch hell. We catch hell. Folks, the kind of vitriol that Michelle Obama faced just on the internet was absolutely it was remarkable, right? And so there's a way in which Michelle Obama gets demonized in some of the same ways that Angela Davis gets demonized when she's, on the run from the FBI in 1971, 1972, right? And so, again, we're all catching hell. And so that's one of the things that I really have been I've been trying to, point out. And I don't want anyone to think that I don't think that, these European standards of beauty aren't remarkable. Black people, we get bombarded with so many jacked up, racist messages, anti-Black messages about our bodies. And that penetrates, it doesn't penetrate all of us, but some of us internalize that madness, right? But we also resist it. And we might resist it, when we're older. We might resist it when we're younger, right? And that was the great thing about what happens in the 1960s with the Afro. You had the older generation were like, yeah, you're not supposed to go out the house with your hair looking like that. You had a younger generation of Black people. Look, we're actually embracing our natural selves. We are not what white supremacy makes. It is actually beautiful. And we hide in who we are as Black people. So I'll stop there.
Great.
Thank you. I'll pass it to Abby.
My question goes back to the two of you, and you guys have touched upon your experiences publishing and all of this material, all of this information. So I guess I was wondering, what were your personal experiences with studying and forefronting Black hair within academic institutions? And what benefits or drawbacks have you witnessed for this discourse within institutional contexts?
Well, since I mentioned before that I started this study of Black hair as my master's thesis when I was in graduate school at Columbia University. And so it was the Graduate School of Journalism. And for our thesis, we were basically supposed to write a full year-long kind of extended news story. And we were allowed to choose any topic we wanted, and we worked with advisors. And my advisor wanted to kill me because I had a new idea every week, and we were supposed to select the idea, refine it, and get going. And every week I would be like, wait, I changed my mind. I knew I wanted to do something about multiculturalism, diversity, something that, dovetailed with my own personal interest of just being like a culture chaser. But I could write, I'm a good journalist because I always can come up with a good idea, right? But I'd come up with a good idea and then again, I'd be off to the next one. So by the time I actually came up with the idea to do my thesis on Black hair, and I was saying I was going to do the history, the politics, the economics, the history of and culture of Black hair, my advisor was admittedly a little bit frustrated, but she also was like, that's not an idea. That is not a topic that you can actually do a thesis on. She was like, at best, maybe you can do a personal essay, but we're talking about a year-long project. There's nothing there. Like, she just didn't see it. And she was a white woman originally from England, but had been in the United States for, I'd say, at least a decade by that time. But I told her, and I still wonder where at that, I was in my mid-20s, and especially because I was so intent on doing well in this program, why I still felt confident enough to say, like, I don't care what you say, I'm doing it anyway. I really felt like there was something to say. I didn't even know what it was. I'd never read a book about Black hair. I'd never seen one doing what I purported to do with my thesis. But I said, I'm doing it. And at the end of the year, and we didn't get grades at Columbia. You passed or you didn't pass. So at the end of the year, my thesis advisor actually invited me to not her office, but to her home for tea, because she's British. And she said, I want you to come over. I want to talk about your thesis. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. Why she wanted me to come over is because she wanted to gravely apologize, because she had no idea what I could have, she just had no idea about the complexity of Black hair. And not only did she tell me, I apologize and this was wonderful, she told me she made a copy and gave it to her friend who was about to adopt a Black child, and told a friend that she had better read it. There's a white woman, adopting a Black child. And then she told me I had to write a book. And again, I was only in my mid-20s, and I was like, I'm just trying to get a job. I wouldn't even know how to start writing a book. But obviously, when I met my co-author, we were both working at Vibe magazine at the time, and she too had done a similar, she did more of a sociological study of Black women and beauty ideals, but she too had an advisor who told her that this was not real academic, worthy of academic discourse, of academic study. And when she was finished, he too apologized and said, like, this is amazing, you should really do something with this, you should write a book about it. So that being said, we wrote the book, it was, well received. I was in the journalism field when I wrote the book, so I wasn't in academia, but then subsequently joined academia. And even though Hair Story had already come out, and while I was on the tenure track, we updated Hair Story, so a new version came out, and even amongst my colleagues, some of them got it, but some of them didn't, and didn't think it should count as real. Like, they just didn't get it. Like, they don't understand that when we're talking about Black hair, we're not writing personal essays. Even if we were writing personal essays, there's still merit to that. But there were some white men who were evaluating my tenure files who suggested that discussing this topic was marginal to, real public discourse or cultural reporting or anything like that. So there's definitely a group of people, I think, who don't recognize the importance and significance of Black hair as a topic of cultural study, right? But I will say that I can't pinpoint it to one thing in particular, but there has definitely been an increase in public awareness of the significance of Black hair, even if it's what I hate, which is the trauma surrounding Black hair. When a child gets sent home from school, when a woman gets fired from her job, when a bunch of men, do a class action suit against FedEx because they can't wear dreadlocks to work, when a young wrestler gets his dreadlocks hacked off at a wrestling match. It's almost impossible to be unaware that there's something about Black hair that needs to be talked about. And I think in my department just alone, I feel like I'm on television or on the radio or getting, quoted probably more than anybody else, simply because I have this area of expertise that seems to come up all the time. I remember being interviewed by the BBC when the Obamas were entered the White House because they wanted to talk about, to Dr. Banks's point, Michelle Obama's hair and what it meant and why people were obsessed with it and what would it mean if she went natural and all of these things where, you know, again, 20 years ago, if you had told me that the BBC would want my opinion on the first lady's hairdo, I would have been like, no, because I am a lazy hairstylist myself. So it's never been my forte to talk about, you know, hair as a beauty image or beauty issue, but it's always been my, you know, interest to talk about Black hair as this part of our cultural heritage that is complex. So I definitely see an improvement in the understanding that this is a topic worth exploration academically. But there is definitely still a ways to go for people to understand what it is and why that we need to talk about it and who's implicated in the conversation, not just Black women, Black men, but also white people and non-Black people, because it's all part of this complicated, that part is complicated, is why are we still having these arguments and firings and non-hirings and needs for laws like the Crown Act just to allow people to show up and be their best selves at work and not have to worry about like everything Dr. Banks is talking about, this double consciousness just to exist in the world and again, be about their business without having to wonder if their hair is going to get in the way.
And, you know, Professor Tharps, I have to say, you know, I am so happy to hear that you stood your ground in writing your MA thesis because, you know, I mean, I don't know anyone who does work in our area who doesn't go through Tharps and Bird. I mean, it just does not happen. You know, you can't, you know, I mean, you can't engage in any discussion without engaging hair stories. And I too, I mean, I read about hair, but I don't do it. I just, you know, I just keep it moving. I keep it moving. You know, I mean, Dr. Ellington, she is like, I mean, she's like,
got a
yes,
good hair game. Look at that. Look at that.
I am like, I bow to her. I'll bow to her.
Yes, yes. I'm just looking at like, maybe I could try that.
Fly, as we said back in the day, fly.
Yes.
Well, you guys have to remember, I'm a fashion professor, right?
That's
my
you
first,
know what? Yes.
So I'm a fashion designer, so I have to be fashionable.
That's it. You know,
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
Well,
hey,
people
you
have
know,
that expectation when you write about hair, though, that you should have a better hairstyle. So I try, but I don't. I mean, it's not pretty, but the book is so good. So I just read the book. Don't judge me, just my words.
I wanted to jump in on this question because as you were talking, Lori, it just brought up my exact same experience, you know, when I was going through becoming a tenure track professor. I had a mentor of mine who is a Black woman. She's since retired, but she was one of the very first scholars in my field who did research on Black dress. And I told her what I was thinking about doing. I told her, I was like, well, I want to do, you know, study on Black hair, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, well, you know what? I'm really afraid for you to do that because I want you to get tenure and promotion. And if you do that type of a topic, you may not get tenure and promotion because they don't see the rigor in you know, in a topic like that. And so it just, you know, it's happening to all of us scholars who have, I mean, because it is a personal thing, but there is so much to know and so much to learn about it that people just, they don't understand the rigor. And I'm actually in the process of writing an anthology. The editors of the publishing company that I'm going through actually told me that I needed to back up what I was saying with more resources because it can't possibly be this bad for Black women. So I'm going to stop right there.
Yeah, and you know, and that speaks to, you know, what Kim Crenshaw and certainly Black feminists just in general saying, believe Black women, you know, when we say that hair matters, that hair is significant, that hair is complex. It's not complicated as Dr. Tharps argues. You know, I didn't have any kind of pushback with my dissertation committee, but what I found was that when I gave talks, and I remember I gave a talk at Stanford, and there was a white female professor, full professor, you know, and I'm just a graduate student, you know, working on her dissertation. And she said, well, I don't see the significance of your study if you're not actually comparing your findings to white women. You know, if you're not also studying white women as a comparative group, you know, and I said, and I said, you know, I actually see the relevance and importance of studying Black women, you know, without, you know, comparing Black women to, you know, white women. And then there were also white women who were like, wow, love your topic, but, you know, talk about white women because we have issues with our hair too. I said, yeah, y'all might have some issues, but your hair isn't, you know, politicized in the ways that is politicized for Black women, you know. And so those were the kinds of comments I got. But you know, I think that, you know, Dr. Ellington, Professor Tharps, absolutely right in terms of folks, you know, questioning the rigor of what we do. And I have to say, when I went out on the job market in, like, you know, 1997, 1990, late 1990 or 96, 97, it was very interesting that I would end up giving these talks, and the like if there was a Black woman, you know, like who could make it to my talk, or if there were even Black women on campus, you know, I would be surrounded by old white men because they were so intrigued. You know, it wasn't about my theorizing about black girls and women in here, but they were so intrigued with my discussion of previous works about hair, like going back to 1922 and this very obscure, very short piece by Sigmund Freud, Medusa's Hair. And then I talked about all of this other anthropological work because I'm a scholar. And so, yes, my work was about certainly Black women in hair, but I wanted to know what other folks within scholarly circles were saying, but also within mainstream circles as well. But scholarly circles, because I was able to make the argument why hair matters for Black women because race matters and gender matters, right? But I think that there's a way in which our topic gets, you know, seen as sexy and not, you know, rigorous. It's like, look, I can turn something rigorous with the quickness, you know. But I think that that's been the case for, you know, certainly this, you know, textures volume, but also Professor Tharps' work, Noli Ray Rooks's work. You know, I think that we've made that case, even though, as Professor Tharps says, there's still some questioning, but I mean, we've come a long way in just 20 years.
Also, I just want to add really quickly, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just want to add really quickly that there's also more of a global conversation, right? I don't know how many people saw the article in the New York Times, I think it was just last week, about the hair revolution, the natural hair movement in Egypt that's happening. Mm-hmm. And all of this is, you know, coming from, I don't want to say that the Egyptians couldn't have come up with this on their own, but obviously these conversations that are happening here in the United States, these movements that are happening, they spread, you know, it spread to the Caribbean, it spread to South Africa, it spread to all different countries on the African continent, it spread to Black communities in Europe. And so when things go global like that, it is a little bit harder for people to act like this is not a topic worth discussing. I mean, it has a global reach and the conversation is so similar. And you're now seeing people writing about it from other countries as well. The Emma DeBerry, and she's a Black Irish woman who lives in London. I don't know what I call that, British, I guess, you know, but her book, I think it's called Hair Tales, you know, it's very similar to, you know, also discusses like Black hair culture. She also has a book, I don't know if it's the same book and it has two titles, one for the US version and one for the UK version, but she has a Don't Touch My Hair. So, but the point is, I think that is also adding to the idea that this is a topic that we can actually have conversations about, because there are more books, there are more global participants in the conversation, which is, to me, fantastic, because we were doing it first, right, Dr. Banks?
Yes, absolutely.
So
Yes.
I want to make sure that we are mindful of your time. We are at 5:49, and I would like to start being able to take some questions from the chat, if that's okay with Bree and Abby. Okay.
That's a-okay with me.
Okay, go ahead.
For this last one, I just
Yeah, I want
was
Bree to
gonna ask for a quick answer. Throughout the culmination of the exhibition and our lives, we understand there are artistic and cultural claims to Black hair and hairstyling. But why do you think it's such a rarity to experience an abundance of shows like textures in fine art settings? How do you think that we can imagine otherwise?
I mean, to be honest, if the question is, why do we not have more exhibitions? That's the best sense of the question. Why do we not have more exhibitions? For one thing, this is the same challenge that my co-author and I had in writing Hair Story, is that this topic doesn't it's not like this has been done before, and the idea of what makes an exhibition, that's why this exhibition is amazing, but collecting the items had to be mind-boggling. Do we go get combs? Do we get paintings? Do we get art? Do we get old ads? There's when Ayana Bird and I did this research, we were in the archives of this person, we were in the library here, we were in the salons and the barbershops, because we had to create our sources. And it's the same thing with the art. It's not like there is, go ask them for their Black hair art, because everybody's got that catalog of art. This is new, and it's never been thought of as its own type of art, right? It's not like you can just, again, go to the MoMA and ask them for all of their pieces in the Black hair section, right? So I think we will see more, and I know we already have, smaller versions and smaller studios and museums. I've seen some myself, a lot of great art around barbershop paintings and things like that. So it's going to build on each other. And I think this particular exhibition is going to do that really, really well. It's going to set a standard, and that it can be can we get the stuff from the textures collection? Let's start from there, because again, it's such a new concept to group things around our hair, because people just don't think of it as a topic, right? It's just inconsequential until it isn't.
Yeah, so my understanding of fine art is that it's supposed to be art for art's sake, right? And so I think within the context of talking about Black hair, it's always politicized. And so to think about, art that speaks to, Black hair as cultural production, or as something to just be about aesthetics. I don't think that that's ever, really going to happen, unless there are more exhibitions like textures, right? Because Black bodies are always, always politicized, and our hair is, but like Professor Tharps says, look, Black hair is complex. And so we have to not just recognize the political, but also the cultural, the intercultural, and the aesthetics, the beauty. So, stop there.
Great. I think we can turn to the audience with the questions. I believe, okay, so I believe Shayna has a question. It is, I wanted to know, is Black hair policed today in other countries like it is in the US?
It is in a lot of places, and sometimes it's worse than the U.S. I always tell this story, which I don't want to demonize any country or culture, but I know that in the Dominican Republic, for example, the level of anti-Blackness is so high that Dominican women, the idea of having to straighten your hair, similar to the United States, it's like straightening your hair is part of the process of being considered beautiful. It's part of the process of being considered just sophisticated. But it's at another level. It's at such a higher level because of the high level of anti-Blackness as a country that is attached to Haiti, where again, the history and politics of those two warring countries is so deep, and the level of anti-Blackness that's kind of baked into Dominican culture is very real, such that there is a very strong growing community of Dominican women wearing their hair natural, letting their curls show. There's a very popular activist named Miss Rizos. That's what she goes by. She's a salon. She now has a salon here in the United States. But she writes about when she decided to stop straightening her hair, she would go out in public and people would throw things at her. They would throw combs at her. It was dangerous. So it wasn't just policing by, I don't know, public figures, but you couldn't walk down the street with the natural and not be afraid to be accosted on the streets, because it was considered, it was just beyond reproach that you would not, or that you would allow your Blackness to show, essentially. And I don't, even the terminology for some of the ways that they would translate something like black hair, it's so offensive. So yes, the answer is other countries, and it's not just in the Dominican Republic, by all means, that's just one example, but it's such a great example because they are embracing their natural hairs. They're having their own big natural hair movement. Same thing in Brazil, which is another place where you have, all different types of hair and textures, but again, a lot of emphasis on straightening and keeping the black hidden. And now they're having a real renaissance of natural hair, and salons are opening that are really helping women to embrace their curls. But absolutely, this is something that, in my opinion, is more externally policed in other countries in the US. I feel like the battle that Black women face about straightening their hair feels a little bit more internal. Like, I don't think a Black woman in the United States feels like she's going to have combs thrown in her face on the bus or walking down the street should she wear her hair curly or straight. I think it can feel more oppressive in other countries. So, and I don't know who's going to have an oppression Olympics or anything and decide where is it worse. I don't think, but I can definitely, from doing research and listening to other stories in other countries, it's real. And it's, the policing and the judgment and the lack of job opportunities, it's all over. Even in Europe, same things. You'll see, there's my favorite story of a Black, I'm sorry, I'm talking so much, but this is my last story. A Black airline, I forget what's the word for a male airline host, steward, what is that? The air host, the person who
flight attendant.
Flight attendant. Thank you. I was like, what is that word? Flight attendant. He was a male flight attendant on Air France, and he was wearing dreadlocks, and they were like, you're not allowed to wear dreadlocks, you're going to lose your job. And he was like, I'm not cutting off my locks. So he had a wig. He had the most ridiculous wig in the world, but he was like, y'all want me to wear this wig? I will wear this wig. But this is a French man, a Black French man. And he was like, if that's what they were going to make me do, I will do it for your little foolishness. So all over the world, we see that Black hair is misunderstood, policed, demonized in so many different ways. But I have to say that most of those examples are 5 to 10 years old, and we're seeing all over the world these, like I said, even in Egypt now, we're seeing a natural hair movement is really growing globally.
Great, thank you. I'm going to turn to a question that was in the chat from Professor Underwood. And he says, you are approaching the textures exhibition from outside the art world. I'm wondering what you see as the benefit of approaching this topic through the eyes of all the artists in the exhibition.
Wow, Professor Underwood, nice to meet you. So, great question, but and this is one of the, great things about Professor Tharps' book, I mean, and also thinking about Willie Morrow's 400 Years Without a Comb is that it begins within a cultural framework, right? The whole discussion about, people of African descent, hairstyling practices, it begins with the culture. And so it doesn't begin with the sociological, it doesn't begin with the political, because pre-colonial significance of hair. We don't understand all this race madness until Europeans, end up, invading Africa, right? We don't understand this until the transatlantic slave trade. And so, from my standpoint, it begins within the context of culture and hairstyling practices as cultural, but also as artistic. When you look at all of the anthropological and archaeological, data, it's there. And so it doesn't begin with me as a social scientist. It actually begins with, the artists, and those, and even if people, going back to pre-colonial Africa, they weren't, even if they, they weren't thinking as artists, but they understood hair to be artistic and hairstyling practices to be artistic and cultural.
Yeah, I just adding to that, absolutely. This, the styles that in pre-colonial Africa that we know about, that we see, examples of, even in the statues, right? And those things that we still have, physical evidence for. We know that this was art. The way that these styles were made, and we have even the way that there were specific ways to sleep with your head elevated on a little like headrest, because you were not going to disturb this art on top of your head. This was not about like, I don't know, I'm going to a party tomorrow and I want to look good for the pictures. It was because somebody spent hours, maybe even days, creating art on top of your head. And so I think it's absolutely makes 100% sense to be examining or contextualizing Black hair from the perspective of art. And that's why we have always been a creative people with our hair. And my goal in this world, and why we wrote Hair Story, was for that Black people to feel free to use their hair as a form of expression, and it let the color, the shape, the size, the texture be whatever you want it to be, and not police it because it means something about your politics or your economics or anything like that. This is how I feel today. I feel pink. I feel blonde. I feel straight. I feel curly. I feel like adding a tail longer than my butt, whatever it has to be, because it's our form of expression, and it is our art. And I always think when I actually spend the money to get my hair actually styled, I really feel like, I just had I have art on my head. When I do my daughter's hair, I feel like I've just done an art project. And so I do think that it's absolutely appropriate to look at it in that context.
I just shared one of the images from one of the pieces that we'll be showing in Textures. This one is called the Fulani Woman. And exactly what you were just describing about not the complexity, but the intricacies of the hairstyles and what they add to the hairstyle. That's like architecture right there.
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
Our hair is amazing. It does amazing things.
It is.
Yes. So I have a question, Dr. Ellington and Dr. Underwood. So Textures is going to open in September 2021. Do you have any ideas about it traveling at some point? Because I would love to host it at UC Santa Barbara.
You know what? In an ideal world, we would have it travel, but it costs so much money to ship all of those pieces. A lot of things are coming from overseas. And then we have really big pieces too. We were blessed enough to be able to get one of Kehinde Wiley's pieces, and his pieces are like 8 foot by 8 foot. So they're huge. So unfortunately, because of financial constraints, we can't travel the show. But we're gonna do our best to make sure that it's available to everyone. We're gonna do a virtual tour. So like you can go on the website, the Kent State University Museum's website, and there'll be a virtual tour of the show. So, but yeah, it's unfortunately we can't, and you have not been the first person to ask us that. We had somebody from Germany wanting to bring textures to Germany, you know, but it would be amazing to travel it, but it's just too expensive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I won't jump on because you're talking about bad hair. This is bad hair. But thank you all so much. This has been such a fun conversation. There's kind of a little bit of a natural hair movement going on in Italy too at the moment. And some people who are putting together a book reached out and said, can textures travel here as part of our book launch? And I think we can just take it as an opportunity for different cultural actors to create their exhibitions related. You know, textures is great, but we just had 3 themes. We thought about politics, Black joy, and community. But you know, you can approach it from so many other lenses, and that's my call to the next generation, like Abby and Bree. Like, go out there, do that, please.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, and even though textures can't travel, you know, that doesn't mean that we can't do some kind of collaboration, perhaps between our 3 universities, UC Santa Barbara, Temple, and Kent State, in terms of having some type of conference, you know, and we can do it, you know, and then highlight Bree and Abby's work, you know, and we can do it at Santa Barbara, you know, when during a time when the weather's great, and, you know, I mean, we bring folks out. So let's talk about it.
Well, speaking of that, Ingrid, we are going to do a symposium. So we're going to have a call. This is going to be towards the latter part of the semester for 2022. So spring 2022, Dr. Underwood and I wanted to do a 1.5-day symposium where we'll put out a call and ask, you know, for scholars to come, and we'll do like a little small conference. So please look out for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all up and ready to go, and abstracts will be due July 1st, and the conference is in April 22.
See, that's my partner.
Great, awesome.
He's an amazing partner. I love working with Dr. Underwood.
No, privilege is mine.
I'd like to
know what? It's go ahead. No,
I just wanted to quickly acknowledge the final Q&A that was sent. I didn't want Alexandra to think that we just forgot about her. Just very briefly, she says, thank you for sharing your research and perspectives with us in anticipation of the Textures exhibition, but also to open up and normalize the conversation that you all initiated, so it can be understood for, as you said, the complex aspects of hair and identity. To what extent do you think we can further the conversation's alignment with the study of art, art history, and feminist studies?
That's a great question. Just the last part of the question again, can I hear it again? Just the last,
to what extent do you think we can further the conversation's alignment with the study of art, art history, and feminist studies? I know we've touched a bit on this, but maybe we can talk a little bit more about the institutional, or I guess the academic studies of those fields.
I think that I think this last conversation we just had about the exhibition itself, you know, by placing Black hair in the context of artistic contexts, right? By organizing more exhibits in art museums, for example, or just, you know, wherever studio space, and making, I mean, you kind of have to bring the horse to water to make him drink, right? You kind of have to create this world where Black hair is seen as an artistic medium, as a source, as either the canvas for art or the subject of the art, until people go, oh, I mean, and I mentioned the barbershop paintings, but those barbershop paintings that are often seen in the Caribbean and in Africa, to me, that's art. In fact, I tried to buy one on my honeymoon. I was in Grenada, and I was like, can I just have the sign? You know, it wasn't for sale, but they are sold as art. So, I mean, so much about our hair culture is art. So I think, again, what just has to happen is to continuously, you know, do the work before people get it until they start to get it. You know, you say something long enough, you know, then people repeat it because they believe it to be true. So if we continue to have art exhibitions focused on focused on Black hair, people start to look at it that way. And the other thing though is, because I was thinking about all the Black hair shows. I mean, Black hair shows have been around forever. And if you want to see art and hair, go to a Black hair show. I mean, it's incredible, like absolutely incredible. But those shows are incredibly segregated. Like you don't see white people trolling Black hair shows. I mean, they really are something insular to the Black community. In fact, white people are probably like, what is she talking about? So it's that idea, is it us opening up these shows so that it is more of a, we are inviting non-Black people into that world? Or is it, I don't know, maybe white people just, we live in such segregated societies. They're just, if they knew about it, they would show up, who knows? But the point is, it's about exposing people to the idea that Black hair can be art. It can be the source, it can be the, like I said, the actual subject matter or the canvas. And in terms of feminist studies as well, it's just about doing the work and then showing people the work until people start to associate one with the other.
And I think within the context of, feminist studies, I think that, the topic of beauty is another ground zero for recognizing difference within the context of understanding, women's experiences, diverse women's experiences. I mean, there's, going back to Lois Banner and, the whole democratization of, beauty, but even within discussions about femininity and beauty, books from the 1970s and even early 80s, it was, it had a white gaze. And so I think even though feminist studies certainly has come a long way because of the great work of Black feminists and other feminists of color, I still think that, there are ways in which, a white gaze continues to manifest within feminist studies. And so, the work, that looks at a democratized beauty, I think certainly has assisted in challenging this white gaze. And so we're talking about an interdisciplinary effort, right? Art, feminist studies, Black studies, history, fashion, all of it. Yeah. And thanks for that question.
Okay, let's wrap it up. I think that was the last question, right, ladies? Okay, so I would like to personally thank you, ladies, for being a part of the Textures project, for partnering with Dr. Joseph Underwood and I on it. I mean, your contributions help make our book amazing. And so we really want to thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today, and everybody else that came. Thank you so much for coming and experiencing this with us. And I would like to thank Abby and Bree for wanting to do this for us. So we always want to get students involved. And so we were very, very happy that you guys wanted to do this. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Any last words, ladies?
Thank you for an awesome, oh no, not me.
No, yes, you. Yes, you. Of course.
You had just spoken. Thank you. So I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of ARC as well. Just speaking with us is such an awesome opportunity to actually have speakers.
We want to hear from you, Abby. Bree, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to say thank you for talking with us. I appreciate it a lot.
It was awesome. This is the best part of my day right here. I'm reminded that I get asked to contribute to a lot, and I've turned some things down. And it speaks to what you mentioned, Professor Tharps, but it's about trauma. It's like, I don't want to talk about hair and trauma, but the textures, I was like, even in the midst of having so much to do, I was like, this is a project that is definitely worthy of my time, and it is necessary. And it really was the way in which Dr. Ellington and Dr. Underwood just approached it. I was like, yeah, I got to do this. I got to do this. And I continue to be honored. Thank you, Bree. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Dr. Underwood. Thank you, Dr. Ellington. And look, Professor Tharps, big fan from way back. And thank you for what you did, because when more of us do this type type of work, it just validates.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy to be here as well. I'm again thrilled that after all these years, people still want to talk about Black hair in all these contexts. And again, especially like where we are now, this exhibition is exactly what I want to be talking about with hair, not the trauma, not the oppression, but the beauty of it, the complexity of it, in all in one space. So thank you, Dr. Ellington and Dr. Underwood. It's truly like speaks to your efforts. So thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. And be safe.
Yes,
Yes.
you too.
Yes, thank you.
Rona's still raging. Good.